Hey everyone, it's Tuesday, April 22nd. I'm Vineet Brach here in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Here are your top stories today. Well, in Langley, RCMP say they are investigating an early morning fire which has left at least a dozen people displaced. Police say at around 5:23 a.m. they received a report of a vehicle on fire. That location is near 204 Street and 66th Avenue. Police say it's unclear what exactly caused the fire, but investigation is underway.
Once our crews arrived on scene, they arrived to a fully involved townhouse fire that had spread to adjacent units. Very significant damage. Looks like at least 2 or 3 of the units are completely burnt out, and there's extension to other adjacent units. So a tremendous amount of damage to the townhouse complex there.
BCEHS says paramedics provided emergency medical treatment to one patient who was transported to hospital in stable condition. Fire crews say the fire is under control, but officers, they will be at the scene as the investigation continues. Motorists and other road users are being advised to avoid that area and take alternate routes. Police are also asking anyone with information about this fire to call them. In Vancouver, police are investigating the stabbing death of a man in Strathcona on Sunday. Police say officers responded to reports of a man who was seriously injured around 3 in the afternoon near Dunlevy Avenue and Pender Street. Now, despite life-saving efforts, first responders say the man later died in hospital. No arrests have been made yet. And reactions and reflections are pouring in after the death of Pope Francis. He died yesterday on Easter Monday in Rome at the age of 88. Pope Francis was the first pontiff from Latin America in more than 12 centuries and the first from the Jesuit order. He also made history in 2022 when he apologized for the conduct of some members of the church in Canada's residential school system. He also said the residential school system had carried out a cultural genocide. Meanwhile, others have criticized him for not acknowledging the full role of the church in the residential school system and instead blaming individual members. And as for the future, one archbishop told the Early Edition this morning that the new pope could build on the legacy of Francis.
Popes nearly always build on the legacy of their predecessors, and then they give it their own particular perspective. The new pope might be, for example, even more concerned with economic justice. I don't know. I don't know who it will be.
And Pope Francis' funeral will be held on Saturday in St. Peter's Square, and the election for the next pope is expected to happen within 20 days. And it was also a busy weekend at the polls ahead of the federal election. Elections Canada says an estimated 7.3 million people voted on the 4 advanced polling days. Those advanced polls were open Friday throughout Monday, and the agency says that's a 25% increase from the 5.8 million electors who voted early in the 2021 general election. And again, Election Day is April 28th. Okay, and spring has sprung, and BC has voted for its favorite feathered vocalist. So after 5 rounds of competition, here is the winning bird. That is the black-capped chickadee, and has officially been named the best bird in BC for 2025. They're known for their bright personality and their signature chickadee-dee-dee call, and it came out on top of 31 other local songbirds in the Wildlife Rescue Association of BC's Songbird Sing-Off. Very cool. They're definitely a fun bird to listen to. And that's it for now. I'm Vineet Brach. You're watching CBC News BC. Stay with us. BC Today is up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. A record 7.3 million voters turned out to advance polls over the previous 4 days. And as of today, all of the major party platforms are now available. We'll go through some of the key highlights of each, and we'll ask you what you think of their platforms and promises. And in 2022, Pope Francis apologized for the Catholic Church's role in residential schools. We'll talk to a local BC Métis leader, and we'll ask you about the legacy of Pope Francis. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. We are less than a week away from Election Day, and that means we've entered the home stretch of the federal election campaign. Now, the major parties have unveiled their costed campaign platforms, the last of which came from the Conservatives this morning. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre spoke this morning in Ontario.
Cutting back on bureaucracy, consultants, foreign aid to dictators, terrorists, and global bureaucracies, slashing money for special interests, and unleashing $500 billion of extra economic growth by unlocking the power of our resources and home building. We will put our own country first for a change. By repealing anti-resource laws Liberals have used to push us down and push our investment out, we will bring home the $500 billion that the Carney-Trudeau Liberals pushed to the Americans. We will build pipelines, mines, and other major projects. We will get Canada building again with a new Conservative economic action plan to unleash our vast resource wealth, build major new infrastructure, bring back investment, and turn Canada into the richest country in the world.
Meanwhile, Liberal leader Mark Carney spoke this morning at a campaign stop in Trois-Rivières, Quebec.
Earlier today, the Conservative Party released their platform, and it really only confirms what we already knew. That Pierre Poilievre has no plan to stand up to President Trump. It's no surprise. This is a new situation, and he's the kind of politician who's never changed his mind since he was 17, but always relies on a reflex to cut, destroy, and divide. And today's Conservative platform, with its phantom numbers, is no different. He wants to cut what Canada needs. With our plan, we will build to make Canada strong.
And NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was in Burnaby today, and he took aim at both platforms from the two frontrunner parties.
Do Canadians honestly believe Pierre Poilievre will keep these programs? I mean, if you just, not to go back too far, he voted against dental care, he voted against pharmacare. When asked, he said dental care doesn't exist. He said pharmacare doesn't exist. He says these things aren't working, that they're not being delivered. He's fought against them, he's opposed them, and now we're to believe that he's somehow going to defend them? I mean, I think people know what Conservatives do. And if someone tells you they're against something, they vote against something, they oppose something, they criticize it, and now on the eve of an election they tell you that, oh, they're going to keep it, Canadians know better. They know that that's not true. But what is, I think, more surprising is the fact that Mark Carney, when people take a closer look, is also proposing these massive cuts.
CBC does have an online interactive tool to read through each of the party platforms and promises by issue. You can go online, just search for CBC Interactives, and you'll see the headline, Compare the Election Promises of Canada's Major Parties. We're going to go through some of those key points in just a moment. I'd love to hear from you as well. What do you think of what you've heard in terms of the party promises and platforms? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. If you want to email us, we're taking your emails to bctoday@cbc.ca. Sanjay Jeram is a senior lecturer at Simon Fraser University's Department of Political Science and joins me now. Hello, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon.
So we had the Conservatives releasing their platform this morning. The Liberals and the NDP did so on Saturday. And as we've been hearing today, record numbers of advance polling voters. This was through Friday to Monday, so 7.3 million turned out. At this point, what difference can these late-stage platforms make?
I think the truthful answer is very little. There isn't really much in this platform that's going to shock anyone who's been following this campaign. And I think, that the clips you played actually are, kind of indicative of what we're sort of facing here. Is I think, the polling has shown a fairly, some consistency with a small Liberal lead. And there's been some polls that have showed that gap narrowing again. At this point, we're not going to get a whole lot of, I don't think we're going to get a massive change unless there is one. But again, polling doesn't necessarily give us all the information we need. But what Carney was saying was that what we're seeing is that while Poilievre is doubling down on the campaign strategies that it always was, and there wasn't a whole lot of emphasis in the platform on Trump, on tariffs, right? The platform opens and sort of is focused on some of the issues where they can differentiate with the Liberals. For example, the repealing the rest of the carbon tax, emphasizing their crime measures, things like that, and scrapping the plastics ban of the Liberals. There's a lot of stuff in there that, if you're supportive of the party, it'll sort of reinforce the differences that you may sort of already know, but it doesn't really add anything new as far as I can see.
Okay. And so what stands out for you then when it comes to Trump? Because that seems to have been the overarching issue in this election from all of the platforms.
Well, they all have a strong emphasis on sovereignty. It's just a matter of where that, again, maybe I'm reading into this with a depth that's not necessarily relevant to the average voter, but the ordering is really interesting to me. And then the Liberal Party, if you look at their platform and you see how it's upfront and sovereignty and sort of building unity. Again, this is sort of in line with the Liberal brand. In many ways, Carney is new, but still liberal in the sense of he emphasizes much of this sort of Canadian unity without trying to sort of micro-target within the platform sort of different regional issues or kind of there is a lot of emphasis and emphasis on the protecting the charter, things like that. Whereas in the Conservative platform, again, like I said, that there's nothing, you get to these global issues of sort of defending Canadian sovereignty, spending on military, the Arctic, sort of later in the platform, and they aren't really targeted at the Trump tariffs in the way that it's clear that the Liberal platform is in those sections. So neither platform is obsessed with Trump, but certainly you can see the Liberal platform, it gives a lot more weight to the uncertainty and mentions in some of the preambles of the sections about the uncertainty that Trump has unleashed, whereas there is nothing of the sort in the Conservative platform.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk about Trump. And it sounds like this morning as well, some reporting from Katie Simpson, CBC's Katie Simpson, who's reporting from the White House saying that the press secretary there has seemed to be talking about lower numbers of crossings at a certain portion of the U.S.-Canada border. So questions are there around whether there might be some change. Just some reporting from Katie Simpson this morning from Washington. Okay, so back to the platforms now. And so we've been talking about how the platforms overall have been responding to Donald Trump's tariffs and that issue of sovereignty. We're going to ask you as well what stands out for you if you've been hearing about the platforms over the last couple of days and today from the Conservatives. What are your thoughts on the platforms from the major parties? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. What do you want to see highlighted in these platforms? Reg is joining us from Moberly Lake. Hi, Reg. Thanks for calling in.
Good afternoon, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, what are you hoping for, or what are you seeing that stands out for you?
Well, there's things I'm seeing and things that I'm not seeing that are important. When it comes down to the whole climate change, energy policy platforms, I see a commitment on the Liberal side to keeping some of the initiatives going to help, families and homes do their part for, home energy conservation. Those kind of practices are important. I don't see the same kind of commitment on the Conservative side. They're looking at, supporting businesses, perhaps around clean energy, that kind of thing. So I see differences there. I do care about that. I do like the idea of a bottom-up and a top-down approach at the same time, where we're given incentives, especially, people that are looking to pass on their homes to, family members and others, where it's an investment, and so it's kind of a legacy. The piece that I'm not seeing a lot is impacted by climate change is the whole water conservation. We're having the droughts here in the north and flooding impacts we've had in BC. And I really like to see a commitment to supporting. We do have a federal provincial initiatives. I realize there's a relationship there, but I think we've really got to focus in on how we're protecting community watersheds and that kind of thing. So those are, a couple of examples. I'm seeing more cuts on the Conservative side, whereas I see this investment piece on the Liberal, which I find attractive. When it comes to, pipelines and that from the north here, I hear the question about the use of the notwithstanding clause. That kind of scares me in dealings with First Nations and jurisdictions there. Is that a reality? So I'm going to be asking about that kind of thing.
Reg, thank you very much for your call. That's Reg at Moberly Lake. Roman is in Port Alberni now. Your thoughts on the party platforms that you've been hearing so far, Roman?
My thoughts are this is one glaring oversight I'm seeing, and I'd like to call attention to it explicitly is, and I'm really glad the pundit that the guest you have referenced this is there levels of sovereignty that exist where one, dare I say, trumps the other, in that Canada's sovereignty in protecting its collective sovereignty, does it forsake the sovereignty of the nations and or the unceded territories of nations that are contained within? I saw kind of evasiveness from both parties to answer the questions directly about accessing resources to pull ourselves through this critical pinch. And I just wonder, is there going to be a plan in place, something to protect the unceded resources that are likely contained within the unceded territories of First Nations peoples as they sit and wait to establish treaties or they're involved in treaties? I just wonder if we have anything from anyone that could help answer to that end.
Yes, Roman, thank you very much for your call. And so, Sanjay, yes, we've seen this kind of focus on opening up energy in Canada to various degrees, depending on the liberal or conservative platform. So what in that addresses the concerns around Indigenous consultation, if anything?
Level of specificity for that particular caller, what I can say is that because it doesn't, as you mentioned, there's nothing that specific in there, right? So what both parties to some extent are suggesting is obviously to a greater extent on the conservative side. Again, it's detailed, it's specified in this kind of like vague, we're going to, repeal the, legislation XYZ as a means to access energy and use it to enrich Canadians effectively is what the Conservatives are emphasizing. Now, they do mention respecting consultation and Indigenous rights. Again, it's simply a sentence and a bullet point in a platform. What does that actually entail? I mean, my guess is as good as anybody's. I'm sure there's people who are more qualified to speculate on that. But that's where all I can say is that it's a good question, right? Because it's not specified to the level of detail that would satisfy someone like that caller who was looking for that level of detail. And to the first caller, I found his point about bottom-up versus top-down environmental issues really interesting because I think that really kind of summarizes the difference between the two parties. Like I know we're leaving the NDP out here, but I know we're just talking about the two frontrunners. But because both parties have effective plans, not effective, but they have plans on climate change, and whether they're effective is for environmental scientists and others to debate. But politically, what you can see is the Conservatives are emphasizing a more bottom-up approach, where incentives sort of galvanize the population to engage in sort of clean energy initiatives as a means to take advantage of those breaks or grants to do so, which then will lead to a greener future. Whereas the Conservatives are retaining some of that top-down legislation, for example, the industrial emitter carbon tax that from the previous regime. So there is a bit more of a top-down emphasis. So that difference is there, and it just really depends on which one you think, or perhaps those who are more qualified in sort of environmental science to figure out which one is actually going to lead to have better success.
Right, and keep I suppose, the economy in mind as well. So let's just go through. I'm on the page right now on CBC that goes through the climate change and energy issues of the platform. So under energy, as we know, the Liberals cut the consumer carbon pricing before the campaign, not the industrial. They plan to introduce incentives to help families invest in clean energy, including zero emissions vehicles. And they are open to building pipelines and speeding up energy projects. And when it comes to sovereignty, they would allow Quebec to veto any pipeline through its territory. The Conservatives would repeal all carbon pricing, including industrial emitters. They would boost incentives, i.e. expand tax credits for businesses that reduce emissions and promote clean energy technologies, and tax incentives for manufacturers who lower emissions. They would support an east-west pipeline and approve projects such as LNG Quebec. The NDP supported the removal of consumer carbon pricing, would keep industrial carbon pricing, and would introduce a border carbon adjustment mechanism to tax imports from countries that don't have or comparable carbon pricing. And they would also cut $18 billion in oil and gas subsidies. And the Green Party would bring in legally binding emissions reductions, and that would be to cut emissions by 60% by 2030. They would invest in an east-west national electric grid. So that from the Green Party. There we go. So we've gone through some of them. So what do you see as the big issues, just to wrap with you, Sanjay, before I go to Tim in Kelowna? What do you see as the big issues, kind of key highlights coming out? You know, housing is in there as well, the economy. What stands out for you in terms of what people seem to be focused on right now?
I mean, I'll just reiterate what I've already kind of said, is I think that both parties are trying to double down on what they want the campaign issue to be, right? Is that the Conservatives released their platform today. I'm interested to hear what other people in the sort of political universe have to say about it. But it strikes me that that the fact that they sort of stuck with their guns, kind of emphasized cost of living issues, some of that language about and some of the there's some clear points of kind of wedge issues, for example, on guns, right, where you have gun control measures are there, but there's also these kind of lines about ensuring that sport and hunting gun owners are protected and their rights are respected, whereas you don't see language like that in the Liberal platform. So a lot of what I see is just kind of pointing out their wedge issues, emphasizing the emphasis on what happened during the Liberal. There's at the beginning, the platform begins with mentions of the inflation that led to out of control costs under the Liberal government over the past decade, right? So it's just kind of a summary, I think, of what we have already heard. And it's a short platform, right? One thing I'll say is that you'll see that the Conservative platform is shorter considerably than the Liberal platform, and the Liberal platform really emphasizes this sort of global dimension and putting that front and center. So that to me was really, I think, what was interesting about it.
Sanjay, good to speak with you. We'll talk again, I'm sure, before Monday. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Sanjay Jeram, Senior Lecturer at SFU's Department of Political Science. Tim is our next caller now in Kelowna. Hi, Tim. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the platforms?
Yeah, I think, for me personally, I'm a young voter who, cost of living is a big concern for this election for me. I think the Conservatives taking a stance on very Canada first. For me, I like that they, want to use our resources to make Canada a stronger nation. I think, Canada globally is one of the most resource-rich countries in the world. And I understand the Liberals have proposed ideas for that too, just at a smaller rate. But I think Canada First for the Conservative platform is something that really strikes hard. In regards to Carney using kind of the Trump card, in regards to Pierre not really speaking on it, I think, quite frankly, the Conservatives, as much as Trump is a threat to Canada, I don't think they are really concerned right now just because of what is going on in Canada. And I do think Pierre will handle that if elected, but, I think Carney's really trying to use that card to reach older voters just because it is a more threatening issue to them as they're more comfortable in life. Not many concerns for cost of living for elder voters. So I think they hear that and it kind of touches them a little bit more than, say, some young voters.
Tim, thank you so much. Good to hear from you in Kelowna. And Brent is next now in Comox. Hi, Brent. What are your thoughts on the platforms?
I'm thinking about they talk about solving the GST problem. The GST is a conservative invention given to us by the Conservatives, opposed by the Liberals until they got into power, and then they immediately flipped, and they killed John Nunziata's career for trying to keep his promise to voters to oppose it. The new testing range, they're testing nuclear weapons such as nuclear subs while hostile to Canadian sovereignty. You cannot be allowed in Canadian testing range until they apologize and reaffirm our sovereignty.
Okay.
And deep integration, they were warned that deep integration with this economy would leave us blackmailed by the U.S. What was happening today was predicted by Ed Broadbent, John Turner, David Orchard, and Deanna Kilmer and others, that we would become under the thumb of Uncle Sam. This was a conservative policy given us by the Conservatives, ignoring the risks we're facing today.
Okay, and in terms of the GST, you're talking about eliminating the GST from for home buyers?
Yeah, well, the Conservatives are promising that, but they gave us the GST. It's a conservative idea to begin with.
Right.
It was supported by the Liberals.
Brent, thank you very much. And yes, in the platforms, the Liberals would eliminate GST for first-time home buyers, for homes under 1 million, on new and majorly renovated homes under 1 million. The Conservatives would cut the GST on new homes up to $1.3 million. Okay, thanks so much for your calls. We're going to go back to some more of your calls coming up right after the CBC News update at 12:30. And then we'll take your calls on the legacy of Pope Francis. We'll hear from a local Métis leader as well with regard to the historic landmark apology the Pope made. This is BC Today. And on the platforms, we have an email from Carol who writes, I'm old enough that I probably won't have to see the worst effects of climate change and other environmental crises. I find it super converging how many people my age ignore the issue because they don't think it directly affects them. I'm so scared about the world my children and their children are going to inherit. It's our responsibility to leave the world a better place for the next generation. The NDP candidate in my riding is 18 years old. I think it's so important we get more young people involved in politics. Thanks so much to Carol from Bowen Island. And of course, we are continuing to take your emails on the party platforms and what your thoughts are. bctoday@cbc.ca is our email address. And Scott writes, on the Northern Grid interconnections as well as NATO spending, one key idea missing from every party's platform is the need to interconnect our electricity grid with Northern Canada. BC should link to Yukon, Northwest Territories and Alberta, and Nunavut to Manitoba and Quebec. This would support energy security, economic development, and resilience as well in remote regions. Crucially, building this with military and infrastructure funding would contribute towards Canada's NATO spending commitment, addressing two national priorities at once. Let's get this on the radar. That's coming from Scott in Burnaby. Thank you again, bctoday@cbc.ca if you want to weigh in, and we'll take a couple more of your calls. I know that Chris is waiting in Victoria and Cody in Trail to talk about the party platforms. It's just about 12:30 now. It's 12:30 now. This is BC Today. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks so much for joining us. And we'll take a couple more of your calls on the party platforms as the election just under a week away, April 28th. And we'll ask a couple more people their thoughts on the party platforms. And we'll talk about the legacy of Pope Francis as well. How do you think the Catholic Church can continue to work on the priorities that the Pope had laid out? More on that coming up too in about 10 minutes. Right now it is 12:30. Time for the CBC News Update.
Good afternoon. As we've been hearing on the show, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre released his platform today, which includes a pledge to cut Canada's deficit by 70%, a promise that relies on billions in new revenues from presumed economic growth. The platform also projects deficits that will add roughly $100 billion to federal debt over the next 4 years. The platform does not include a timeline for getting back to a balanced budget. Liberal leader Mark Carney says the platform includes a lot of magic numbers. Elections Canada is reporting an estimated 7.3 million Canadians voted in advance polls over a 4-day period. That is a 25% increase over the last federal election. And one person is in hospital after a fire in a Langley townhouse complex early this morning, which forced more than a dozen people from their homes. Officials say the injured person is in stable condition. Police say initial information suggests the fire may have started in a vehicle. And now the forecast on the North Coast. Showers this afternoon with a high of 7. Highs around 13 with strong winds and some sunshine in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, mainly cloudy with a high of 12. Highs from 12 to 16 with a mix of sun and cloud in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, some sun and cloud with a high of 16 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, mainly sunny this afternoon with highs around 15. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Rob, thank you very much. That's Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Let's go to some more of your calls now on the party platforms in this federal election. And Chris is in Victoria. Hi, Chris.
Hi, how's it going?
Really well. What are your thoughts?
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Conservative platform. I'm completely blown away by the fact that they just came out with it today after advanced polling was done. And I think that there's a big problem around all parties' platforms relying heavily on tax cuts, but it seems like the Conservative platform is relying the most on tax cuts. And really, when it comes down to it, all tax cuts are going to do is put pennies back in our pockets, not hundreds and hundreds of dollars, pennies, not making things more affordable for Canadians, and also in the process, probably taking away important programs and services that Canadians need. And on top of that, in his platform, he seems to be relying on revenue coming from economic growth that will come from his tax cuts, which is only going to happen if the economy improves significantly, which at this point is very uncertain. So I'm not really confident in the fact that they have any kind of a decent costed platform as far as, gaining any revenue for the country, let alone the fact that they're looking to pillage the country of our resources, completely discounting any environmental responsibility we have to the world and our youth. And on top of that, because they put the platform out so late, it just reinforces how unprepared the Conservatives seem to be and aligns with what I seem to be as their brand running for the whole election of showing up late or in many cases not showing up at all. I can't understand any reason why a Canadian would vote for this Conservative government. And it scares me to think that they may have a chance to get in power.
Chris, thank you very much for the call. Good to hear from you in Victoria. It is 12:34 now. You're with BC Today, and we are looking at the legacy left behind by Pope Francis after he died on Easter Monday. And we're asking you, what do you think of Pope Francis' legacy, and how do you think the Catholic Church can continue that legacy? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And over the 12 years, his 12 years as the head of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis led a shift in tone, and he made a landmark historic apology in 2022 when he apologized for the conduct of some members of the Catholic Church with regard to Canadian residential schools. So we're asking you, how do you reflect on Pope Francis's legacy, and how can the Catholic Church continue it? You can give us a call again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email as well is bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me now is Pixie Wells. They are the president of the Fraser Valley Metis Association. Pixie, thank you so much for joining us. Good to speak to you again.
Good morning. Tansei Swale Latte Tel Swedish and Akashin. My name is Pixie Wells. I am no longer currently the president of the Fraser Valley Metis Association, but just wanted to put that out there. And I'm coming to you today from the traditional territory as Samath and Mathically, colonially known as Abbotsford, traditionally known as Sequicho, which means in the middle. Thanks for having me today.
It's very good to speak with you again. Okay, so former president of the Fraser Valley Metis Association. Now, just over 3 years ago, you were part of the delegation of Indigenous leaders who went to the Vatican to meet with Pope Francis to demand an apology from harms from Canadian residential schools. How do you reflect on the work that has been done by the Catholic Church when it comes to reconciliation?
Reflecting, yesterday was a big day for me, reflecting on the journey that we took as Indigenous people from across Canada, and then just sort of reflecting on sort of where we go from here. It's kind of like right now, I think it's a little bit of a blank slate at this point. And I think just remembering the journey that we took together with Pope Francis, and how do we keep that united, or how do we keep that moving forward in a way of humanity, in the way that he walked, in the way that he spoke. So for me, it's about how do we keep that unity together, and how do we keep moving forward on reconciliation.
What would be your... Okay, first, can you take me back to your visit as part of the delegation? What do you think of it? What are your memories and your thoughts when you look back?
Well, when I reflect on it yesterday and reflected on the whole journey of the people who walked with us, and the elders who may have got some of their apologies and their heartfelt needs met, in the fact that he listened and was quite a humanitarian from the way that I seen it. And he sat and he listened, he cried, as a human, I think he took those emotions in, and when he came to Canada, I believe that he tried to do his best in his apologies coming forward. And some people took them as good and walked away with it, like Elder Angie. It fulfilled something in her that she needed from the leader of the church that she walks in. And also for some of those survivors who feel that accepting an apology means that nothing happened. So needing to understand all of those nuances and understandings. But one of the things that I learned from my journey, I grew a lot, but I also learned how to be a community leader through some of watching him express his emotions and his, considering that he sits in such a big place, but he was the Pope of the people. And I seen that, being able to sit with him and actually touch him and actually have those conversations, I believe was quite rewarding for some people. And I think also for myself, it helped me grow into being a better leader and understanding, the voices of my people, and how do I help the 2S LGBTQIA plus people live in harmony with the things that were set out in his actions of coming to Canada and apologize.
And do you think that more steps could be taken now when it comes to that apology? He apologized for the conduct of some members within the Catholic Church. Do you see, a further extension of that apology, perhaps to expand to the whole church?
I do. And I believe that it's, all of these things, and I've learned as a leader that these things take time. They just don't happen overnight. But I still think we need to have that conversation and be having those conversations. It's not just a one and done. What are the actions that come after the apology? And how do we all move forward in a good way and making sure that all the needs and the people are heard? But how do we work together too in unity in rectifying some of the injustices and walking in a good way together? And I think there's opportunities for all of that to happen. And I think, as some of the things that we took, learning the truth and, it's not always about financial needs. It's about understanding what the truths were and how do we support those people in good ways. And we know that, and we all know that the church is, financially wealthy. So maybe we could work together in a way that, encompasses helping First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people heal from the inside and create safe spaces for them to do it in a cultural aspect rather than from a biblical aspect. So helping create those spaces of sweat lodges and those spaces where they can go back to ceremony. That is one of the things that I took away from this journey as well, is connecting to ceremony and learning what that cultural experience means as a spirituality piece of myself, but also as part of my journey and walking alongside of the other individuals that went over there with me.
What was the significance of that apology to you?
The significance for me, I think it showed that there was a step forward, and it also showed that during all of, when you look at the church, and it took a long time to get there, but it took the right person to be able to stand up and do the work and step outside of some of those comfort zones that we're all used to. And I think good leaders do that. Good leaders bring the voice of the people to the people, for the people. And I think that, I don't think it was always so easy for Pope Francis to do some of the things that he did, but he did them because he's a human, and I think he felt human emotion. And I think he used that human emotion for the best of all people across this country. But the apology to me was more home felt, and brings back for me the action of what we need to do and how do we create that forward. But seeing some of the survivors get something that they needed to be able to move forward, or be able to express their feelings, or even see the leader of the Catholic Church come and acknowledge them, I think was honorable. I was honored, but also humbled at the same time to be able to sit with some of these people who went through these journeys, and able to sit with them and listen to their stories and listen to their truths. And I think that's where the apology comes into play. But I think there's a lot more work to do. And I think the next Pope, or whoever the Pope will be in the future, has big shoes to fill and big hands to fill. And I hope that they continue to do the work that needs to be done in reconciliation.
I note that you're using the word reconciliation to call for action. What is the work that you think needs to be done?
Well, again, I think we need to sit down and figure out, and I think some of the documents and files and some of those things need to be, given back to the people who are asking for them. And I know that there's some work being done there, and there has been some work being done. But again, we need to move faster than a snail's pace. I think we need to move a little bit faster than that. Not all of our elders will be around forever, and these people that had these atrocities happen to them need to know that their truths are the truths, because people are calling them out now. People are calling people out and saying that these things didn't happen. So I think it's really super duper important that we all work together to strengthen the voices of the survivors, but also to work together to strengthen the voice of the church in unity, and how we all work together in humanity is. I think it's really important, especially at this time now in Canada, with everything going on in Canada as well. I think it's really important that Canadians stand together, shoulder to shoulder. And how do we do that together as Canadians? How do we do that as Catholics? How do we do that as Indigenous people? And I think it just means we all need to stand in a circle and not be looking down at anybody. We're all here together, and we need to figure out how to do this in peace and harmony, just sort of like the Pope was not asking us to do, but looking for that action and that truth in the stories. And I do believe that there's things that still need to be done. I think there's some of the things that were taken over there, and maybe the headdress gifted back to the person who gifted it to him. And again, these are just my thoughts of a way for the next Pope to make those same sort of actions into reconciliation and bring truth and hopefully some trust to be able to walk forward, because I think it's gonna need some trust. And I think there was some trust built when we went over to Italy to see the Pope, and I think that spoke volumes in Canada as well. So.
My guest is Pixie Wells. They are the former president of the Fraser Valley Metis Association, part of the delegation of Indigenous leaders who traveled to the Vatican just over 3 years ago to meet with Pope Francis. And we're asking you, what do you see as Pope Francis's legacy, and how can the Catholic Church continue that work? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-4900. 5950 604 669 3733. You can hit pound 690 as well. Well, this morning, the early edition host, Stephen Quinn, spoke to the Archbishop of Vancouver, Michael Miller, and they talked about the shift in tone that the Pope left on the Catholic Church.
Well, the church is always evolving, picking up new tones from the gospel. And certainly Pope Francis put head and center solidarity with the poor, with migrants, with refugees, with prisoners, with the dispossessed. He'll long be remembered, I think, for those special traits, along with his concern for human ecology. His famous statement, Laudato Si, he put sort of just new accents. What happens, each pope takes a part of the gospel and brings it to the fore. And it was compassion and solidarity with the poor, I think, was the great gift of Pope Francis.
That is Archbishop Michael Miller in Vancouver, and talking about the shift in tone from Pope Francis and what he left on the Catholic Church, what legacy he has left. And my guest right now as well is Pixie Wells, former president of the Fraser Valley Metis Association. And so, we've heard now there's a lot of speculation as to who will be the next pope. What would be your advocacy toward the next pope? What would you like them to do, to focus on? What is the work you'd like to see from them?
For me, first of all, I think they've got some work to do in picking a pope, and I think that I was going to speak volumes is how the Catholic Church moves forward in its voice of bringing people together. Again, one of the things that I learned going over there is without unity, you don't have community. So that was a huge thing for me. And again, the Cardinal spoke there of, that solidarity. And I think that is something that the next Pope is going to have to bring. And I think it's going to have to be a conversation with some of our leaders and some of our people, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, as to how do they work together to continue the legacy of Pope Francis, and also that solidarity. Like I said, without unity, we don't have community. So we need to unify, and we need to figure out how we can do that in a collective way, and making sure that everybody's needs are met.
It struck me that when we started speaking, you said yesterday was really meaningful to you. It meant it was a significant day for you, and I acknowledge that there's a lot of emotion perhaps running through you as well. What have you talked to other members of the community? What are those conversations like today?
Well, I haven't talked to too many people. Again, I was born and raised Catholic. My uncle was a Catholic priest, so for me, and being in that moment and not transitioning, but sort of moving into my spiritual identity as an Indigenous person, it had a profound impact on me. Again, like I said, I was born and raised Catholic, so just because I don't go to church on Sundays anymore and I choose a different spiritual path doesn't mean that it wasn't ingrained in me, and that understanding of all the things that come with it. So for me, it was emotional and I felt for our elders. I felt for our elders who may be very concerned about where we go forward. Was this just the act of one human? So that kind of concerned me yesterday, and I will be reaching out to some of the people that I did go to Italy with. I'm just reflecting on my own journey, and just sort of reflecting right now as to how do I support those people, and what's the voice that I need to bring for my people, and again, at the end of the day, how do I support myself in my own emotions and feelings and reflecting? So just taking a couple of days to do that.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your joining us and thoughtfully talking through and reflecting on the legacy of Pope Francis today. And I wish you well as you go through your week, and take care of yourself and others in your community. Thank you so much, Pixie.
Marcy, thanks for having me.
Pixie Wells is the former president of the Fraser Valley Metis Association. Well, Pope Francis left a mark here in BC in more ways than one. He gifted 2 symbolic garments, Vancouver's Holy Rosary Cathedral, during his 2022 visit. This is at Vancouver's Holy Rosary Cathedral. And Father Pablo Santamaria, the cathedral's vice rector, he spoke with CBC's Anna Park.
One of them is the suketo, or the skull cap that the Holy Father wears. Seminarian, now priests, went to World Youth Day and managed to. There's a tradition that you exchange it with the Pope. The mitre is a much more. It's a symbol of his teaching office. It's the tall hat. That one was made here in Vancouver. Paid for. My parents paid for it. It was done by a local artist. And the native elements in the front and back of the mitre, the beading, was done by a Nisga'a lady, Julia Kozak. It was made for that mass that the Holy Father celebrated in Commonwealth Stadium back in July of 2022. But a lot of people have never had that opportunity to meet the Holy Father. So this is a way for people to get some closeness.
That is some thoughts with regard to the two symbolic garments that were gifted by Pope Francis to Vancouver's Holy Rosary Cathedral. You're listening to Father Pablo Santamaria, who is speaking with the CBC's Anna Park. It's 12:52 now. You're with BC Today. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks so much for joining us, and much more election coverage, of course, today, throughout the day here on CBC, and throughout the week as we get closer to the main election day, voting day, Monday, April 28th. Well, the platforms are out. The Conservatives released their platform this morning. The NDP and the Liberals released theirs on Saturday. And we were asking you, what are your thoughts on the parties' platforms and each of their promises? Lots of emails have been coming in too. Sammy writes us, it's absolutely amazing to me how Americans and Canadians fall for get-rich-quick schemes as laid out by politicians. Silently, we listen as young men in Canada support a platform, so they think their wallets will grow quickly as wide as their parents with houses that are not selling. Can people not see what is happening in the USA stock market? Have they asked the question, just how long can those losses continue before it hits a line? And like the tariffs, under McKinley, 6 months after they were brought in and went nowhere, a depression continued. Do some research. Ask questions of people who work with numbers who are not politicians. Ask questions of people who understand how one law will not fix one thing, especially with no preparation on the numbers in a platform add up. And I'm not an economist. Okay, thank you for your email. And Donna writes from Penticton, I attended Pierre Poilievre's rally in Penticton as I was undecided on how to vote on April 28th, so I wanted to hear what he had to say. His plan was to reduce and cut many taxes, which was very popular with the crowd. Since collecting tax is Canada's source of revenue, I'm very concerned that his proposed deep tax cuts will come at the cost of healthcare, infrastructure, etc. There was also no mention about how he will deal with Donald Trump. Thank you very much. That's from Donna in Penticton. And Carol writes as well from Bowen Island. Now that the parties have all released their platforms, I can't help but think of how out of touch the Conservatives seem to be. Why would we bring back single-use plastics and reduce measures to reduce carbon emissions? I also wanted to say how encouraged I am by what the NDP has put forward. It actually feels grounded in reality for those of us trying to make ends meet, take care of our families, and still feel some hope about the future. Their commitments on housing, climate, and public health care stand out to me as practical and sincere, and not just headline chasing. I'm not usually an NDP supporter. I've switched between Green and Liberal all my life, but looking at all the platforms, I'm strongly leaning toward the NDP. That's from Carol writing in from Bowen Island. And more emails now. bctoday@cbc.ca, of course, is our email address. Mina writes as well, nobody is talking transportation and the costs of it, especially road transportation. Traffic everywhere costs so much, hundreds of billions of dollars, and investment in transit and high-speed rail are needed. Okay, thank you so much as well. bctoday@cbc.ca. I'm just trying to read through these emails here that are coming in. Marge writes in Maple Ridge, what does it say about the Conservatives that the Conservative platform is released on the last day or after advance voting, despite his Poilievre's request for an election for more than a year. And another email here now from Pat at Gabriola Island. And Pat writes, I would like to suggest a few things. A moratorium on realtors purchasing residential properties. This will make a small dent in availability, but will level the playing field a bit and lessen flipping, gentrification, and profit taking. The unprecedented rise in the perceived value of homes is due in part to provinces increasing valuations to harvest more tax dollars. No way did my home increase in value by 38% 2 years ago. Who monitors these decisions? Finally, I'd like to see a hold on international purchases of Canadian companies and raw resources. Any international purchase should include 5% ownership of the company retained by the Canadian people. There is a lot more, but thank you for the opportunity to engage. And that's Pat writing us as well when it comes to the election platforms that you're seeing. Again, you can always let us know what you think, bctoday@cbc.ca. And we're going to continue to talk about the election throughout the week. And we'll talk about energy issues as well and climate change later on in this week. We'll ask you why you're voting. This Friday, we'll focus the program on the election. We'll ask you what is getting you to vote. We know that there was a record number of people turning out for the advance polls, 7.3 million people, and that's a 25% increase from the previous election in 2021. And so asking you this Friday, what is getting you to vote? It looks like there's a very engaged electorate in this election. So what is the issue that's getting you to vote? You can call us on Friday. Let us know as well. You can just email us now, bctoday@cbc.ca. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Michelle Elliott.